I'm going to do another video exposing Dan McClellan as a fraud. Now, I've been doing a lot of research on Moses and the Exodus. And Dan McClellan is trying to say that there's no evidence that the Exodus ever occurred. And there's a lot of controversy about when the Exodus occurred. There is not, I have to admit, there's not like solid evidence. You know, Moses lived in a certain amount of time. Scholars debate if the Exodus occurred in the 1440s or the 1240s, around their 70s. It's disputed. There is a lot of evidence that the Exodus occurred around the time of Ramses. For example, the name Ramses is in the text of the Bible, and the city was abandoned and just disappeared in the wilderness. It's been discovered. So the Bible said that there is a city called Ramses that the Hebrews built, and it has been excavated. It's been discovered and excavated, and that gives a lot of credibility to the Bible. So I think that you can say that there is evidence of the Exodus. And of course, he's just going to say it's a legend. And there are some scholars that do believe that. I want to mention a book. This is not a biblical inerrancy book by Richard Elliott Friedman. And he addresses these questions. He doesn't say that the Exodus happened as described literally in the book of Exodus. He says that these are accounts written later, but based on historical facts. And he presents the evidence and also the controversy about this. And there is a date in the scriptures, probably a symbolic date, but some people think this would be a earlier Exodus. They discount the scripture saying the Hebrews built Ramses and say, oh, this is talking about Avarice or some other place. I believe that the Hebrews built Ramses. It's not referring to Avarice, it's referring to Ramses. But there are some archaeological discoveries that are important for the Exodus story. And of course the big one is the Merenptah monument. And this is the son of Ramses the Great. And he mentions Israel on his monument. And that's the only reference to Israel. When was this? This is like 1207 or so? I've seen that monument when I was in Egypt. But that's very significant. And notice a lot of the evidence we have of the Exodus is all like discovery of the city of Ramses. This monument mentioning Israel is close to the reign of Pharaoh Ramses. That's why in most movies Ramses is depicted as the Pharaoh of the Exodus. But Merenptah, he's also a contender for the Pharaoh of the Exodus. I actually went into his tomb when I was in Egypt as well. So the story of Exodus is very important because it's foundational. Just like it says in the Gospel of John, it says the law came through Moses, but grace and peace came through Jesus Christ. John is acknowledging that Moses and his revelation is foundational to the gospel. When Jesus is on the Mount of Transfiguration, Moses and Elijah appear with him, representing spiritually the law and the prophets, the Torah, and the rest of the New Testament, which is put in the blanket term, the prophets. So this Israel in Scripture is important, just to show that Israel existed in the ancient times. This is something that wasn't just invented later by scribes around the year 300 or 500 or whenever. But it goes back to antiquity. We have this is important discovery. Sure, this isn't something that's made up much later, but this shows that Israel existed in 1200 BC, and Merenptah claims that he destroyed Israel, which he didn't. It's to boast. So another important discovery is it's in Sudan. It's the Temple of Soleb, and this is the temple of Amenhotep III. Amenhotep IV is Akhenaten, the monotheistic pharaoh. but Amenhotep the third is his father, and this is a Hebseb temple, because if you're pharaoh for 30 years, it's like a jubilee, and you have you're supposed to have to show his prowess of being pharaoh. You're supposed to jog, do feats of strength and stuff like that. But he built a temple, celebrating his rule in what's today Sudan. It's damaged. It's not in a perfect state of repair. Been to Karnak. Karnak's a lot better preserved than Soleb, but a lot of Soleb is still there. And once again, just like the Merenptah thing, this is older than Merenptah. This is around the 1400s. He claims that he defeated the Sheshu, or the Bedouin, the Bedouin of Yahweh. So here we have the name Yahweh. So Dan McClellan he's ridiculing some evangelical Bible scholars for saying this is proof of the Exodus. And I don't agree with those scholars on this, but these scholars were not trying to deceive anybody. This is an important archaeological discovery. An inscription of the sacred name of God, of Yahweh, Jehovah, written in, of all places, a pharaonic temple to the Egyptian gods in what's today Sudan. This is what scholars think is you have the Kenite hypothesis. What is the Kenite hypothesis? The idea is you have Jethro as a Kenite, and he's a desert, belongs to a nomadic, the Midianites area. He's a Kenite, but he belongs to the tribe of Cain. And so the Israelites in Egypt are worshiping Elohim, and the idea is that Moses flees from Pharaoh. He meets Jethro. Jethro is a worshiper of Yahweh, and the God Yahweh says, I am El Shaddai. I am the God that your forefathers worshipped as El Shaddai, but my name is Yahweh. Go and tell my people in Egypt, I am their God, and tell Pharaoh, let my people go. The story of Exodus. So the idea is that knowledge of this name came through these desert people. So this gives credibility to that, because you have, probably before the Exodus, you have these desert people who are worshiping Yahweh. And what I think happened is the Bible talks about Yahweh coming from Mount Seir, which is around Petra, and Sinai, right? God comes from these areas, and he goes north. And that's understood as the Moses the Exodus. Moses meets Yahweh Mount Sinai through Seir and goes up, establishes in the Holy Land. But you could have the migratory routes, the caravan routes of the Kenites. And there were Aramaic kings in Hamath in Syria. I've been to Hamath too, I've been around. That, like you have one called Yahweh Bidi. It's his name. So some people think, well, maybe he had Israelite connections, but it could be that these Arabic or Arab desert, I don't know if they'd be Arab as you call them today, they're Semitic people. But these desert Bedouin people, called the Sheshu, and Egyptians, are going around. They were metalsmiths, and they're doing on their caravan routes, traveling around, spreading giving goods and services, different kinds, and spreading the knowledge of their God Yahweh. And the Israelites also become a people of Yahweh. So he mentions this book called it's Yahweh Before Israel. And the good thing about this book is it's been very hard to find information about Soleb. But this person is trying to argue that people worship Yahweh in Canaan before the Israelites did, which is possible. I mean, I think that, the names of these Aramaic kings in Hamath give credibility to that, and other inscriptions. So, what does this have to do with Moses and the Exodus? Well, this is a theory that was derived from linguistic evidence in the scriptures. And through this archaeological discovery, soul of it seems to have credibility. Plus, Yahweh, the name Yahweh, Israel's attested historical archaeological record. Yahweh's attested historical archaeological record. And we have this theory that's out there with no evidence except for textual evidence from the scripture, now giving more validity by this discovery. In this book, Yahweh Before Israel, he talks about the Song of Deborah, where it doesn't mention Judah, it doesn't mention the Exodus, it does mention Yahweh coming from Seir, but it's like these are people of Yahweh of the north, and their introduction to Yahwism wasn't through Moses and the Exodus, according to this theory. But this theory is just like the Kenite hypothesis. This theory is derived from. You look at the Song of Deborah, just like you look at the Song of the Sea, and it's very antique Hebrew. Languages evolve continuously through the text of Scripture. You can see how the language of Hebrew evolves. So this is very archaic Hebrew. So the Song of the Sea, about celebration of crossing the Red Sea, and the Song of Deborah are very, very ancient Hebrew poetry. So that's just like the Kenite hypothesis. It's deriving a theory. This person is not through the archaeological record, but through linguistic analysis and textual evidence, Scripture. So Dan McClellan is just being dismissive of this discovery. It's actually a rather significant discovery, and I think that, the name Yahweh. I think there's Amarna West, which is a copy of this inscription found in southern Egypt. But this does it prove the Exodus? No, but it does prove the name Yahweh was known. And some scholars do date, I don't agree with them, but educated, reasonable, credentialed scholars believe the Exodus happened in 1440s, and they're going to appeal to that discovery. There's nothing wrong with that. So, Dan McClellan to mock or he's not trying to look at the evidence to discover the truth. He's trying to dismiss and attack evidence that would give any credibility to the Exodus account. And the name of Israel being mentioned in the ancient Egyptian text, the name Yahweh being mentioned in the ancient Egyptian text, and also at Abu Simbel there's a picture of Ramses's battle tent, which looks a lot like the Tabernacle of the Wilderness, which also gives, so you have a tent very similar to the one that Moses used, depicted on the wall at Abu Simbel. So a lot more work needs to be done with most of the Exodus. Like I said, I lean towards, honestly, I think Merenptah is the fear of the Exodus, but Ramses is a strong contender. But a lot of work needs to be done this area. We might be able to. So these discoveries are significant. So Dan McClellan is just trying to dismiss this. And I could talk, present a lot more evidence, as Richard Elliott Friedman does in his book, of the historical basis. Another thing is, you have the documentary hypothesis. I mentioned the earlier presentation. I was talking about with the Q document, we have accounts of the life of Jesus less than 20 years after his crucifixion. But with the documentary hypothesis, a lot of conservative Bible scholars would dismiss it. But the idea is you have 4 distinct texts, and you have the Yahwistic text where the name Yahweh is used. You have the Elohistic text where the name Elohim is used for God. Then you have the P for the Levitical text, the priestly text, and then you have the Deuteronomy, the book of Deuteronomy, basically. So Richard Elliott Friedman is a proponent of this, and he's dating some of these texts around 900 BC, shortly after the time of King David. So, like I said, a lot of conservative Bible scholars will say no, Moses wrote the Torah as is, but someone like Dan McClellan is like, oh no, Ezra made this up, around 400 BC. Ezra just invents the story of Moses and the Exodus. That's what Dan McClellan would like to have you believe. But when did the Exodus occur? 1200, so centuries later. But they might have incorporated lost texts into these writings. Because we've really lost a lot of information sometimes I think about the Phoenicians, this great civilization that really impacted history. We know so little about them. We have the Ugaritic text of the Baal cycle. And I wrote my book on the Baal cycle, derived from those texts and other ancient texts about that. But we know hardly anything. We probably only have 1% of all the literature produced by the Phoenicians. I mean, our alphabet's based on the alphabet that was introduced by the Phoenicians. And a lot of information from ancient times is gone. Like using papyrus, like the Ugaritic texts are inscribed on little bricks, basically, clay tablets. That's why they preserved it. If that was papyrus, it had been gone a long time ago. So the Bible is, it's passed down. But like I said, people talk about, no one denies that Julius Caesar wrote the Gallic Wars, or Homer, or whoever Homer was. They attest that the Odyssey and the Iliad are very ancient. Do we have a fragment or a writing of the Odyssey and the Iliad? But it's just because we don't have an ancient manuscript, they don't deny that this book has been faithfully transmitted as important literature through the ages, and that we're looking at the same Odyssey and the Iliad that was read by the ancients soon after they were originally written. So there's as much evidence to believe in the historical reliability of the Bible is anything else. And this Dan McClellan character is a BSer. And he needs to be debated, to be put in his place, because he's got some kind of anti-Christ vendetta. So he's not really speaking as a scholar. He's speaking as he's a polemicist. He's a polemicist. There's a place for him. That's what he is. He's a polemicist. He's not a Bible scholar. He's a polemicist. And there's a place for that. I want to do scholarship, right? Like, here's the evidence. There's different theories. I lean towards one, but there's scholars as good as me that don't agree with me. Maybe they're right. I think I'm right. I think the evidence leads this way. But just want to be intellectually honest. And see, that's the problem with Dan McClellan, is he's not intellectually honest. If you want to learn about the Bible, don't go to this guy. He's got some kind of axe to grind. He's a deceiver, a base deceiver. And when I see him making partial, omitting facts, misleading, deceptive statements all the time in his little 5-minute videos, and he needs to. I'll debate him. I'm not afraid of the guy because, like I say, he's an intellectual lightweight. Or Wes Tuff, or any scholar could put this man in his place and expose him for the fraud that he is. So just beware of people like that. What concerns me is there are people susceptible to his twisting the facts or omitting key facts and being deceptive. We know, scholars believe in that this is not true, and I speak in authority. I know what I'm talking about, and that the Bible's not true, the Trinity's not true, blah, 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 all these things he's saying. But you don't have scholarly consensus on these things. That other scholars would say things different from what he's saying, that are more educated than he is. And like I said, he's not a scholar, he's a polemicist. We've got to be aware of that guy. If you want to learn about Bible and history, don't go to this Dan McClellan, because all he has is hatred and vitriol for the scriptures and what Christians believe. So you need to tune that guy out.